Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Hello, everyone. So great that you're signing in and sharing a learning journey with me and with this wonderful community of friends that is gathered to share learning that I'm honored to present to us tonight on behalf of Valley Beth Shalom. We're calling this class, and we'll be continuing for the next few weeks in kind of a mini course called Soul Mastery. And the primary subject is Mussar, and we'll talk a little bit about what Mussar is, and what that term means and why it's a subject worthy of study. And in particular tonight, we will be studying one of the character traits, the midot, entitled order or Seder. And I think that that is such a vital topic of conversation for us to begin this course of learning for this evening. Not only because we're looking for some order in the midst of a tremendously chaotic time in which there is news that is dramatically changing our behavior by the minute. We just got news in Los Angeles that we are, while not formally on what is called a lockdown or a shelter in place, we're trying to use the language. I think that the county issued safer at home, and it is effectively creating an environment in which all non-essential behavior is limited to the home. And that if there is any essential, critical, life-saving or social-saving efforts that are so necessary for us to continue living, whether they're in the medical profession or their food service providers or their city officials that make sure that the very important things that we have in our lives are still functioning, that is how we are to proceed for the certainly the short term. I think that the attitude is that this is not going to be a long-term proposition, and we're trying to create a sense of security and a sense of safety in the midst of a lot of anxiety and concern. And that's why we're gathering together to learn tonight, because we want to learn together. We want to do the thing that makes us as Jews and as a community the best, which is that we learn together, that we have moments of connection, whether they are in person. We have a concept in Judaism called shomer negia, in which we have to protect the touch that exists between us. So this is a whole new form of shomer negia, in which we are distancing ourselves physically, but not distancing ourselves to connect our souls and our hearts together and our minds together and to create and produce just the wonderful things that we do as a community. And speaking of community, it is once again with privilege that Valley Beth Shalom is sponsoring this, and we're glad that you've checked in here. And just to know that the Valley Beth Shalom community is still very much thriving and reaching out to its members. And that's why we have our daily minyan at 7:30 a.m. in the morning and 6 p.m. in the evening. And we'll have our Shabbat services coming up, and that will be taking place at 9:30 in the morning on Saturday morning. There'll also be a Torah study with Rabbi Ed Feinstein at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. Be sure to go to the Valley Beth Shalom at Home page at www.vbs.org, and all of the information will be available to you there. And while we are presenting this content, our staff and team, our educators, our leaders, we are constantly reaching out to each other, not only taking care of each other, but we are creating ways to continue providing high quality content and learning opportunities for our congregation, but also for everyone in the Facebook universe that will tune in and learn with us. And again, we're glad that you're here. So enough public service announcements aside, and to get back to our subject of study for the evening, which is this idea called order or Seder. But in order to get to that quality deeply, and I had submitted the text I don't know yet. This is one of my learning edges of how to use this medium and to project text. I don't think that I can actually bring text onto the screen while I'm talking. So if you don't have the text, I'm going to just try something really funny. Let's see if this works. Woo! Check it out. That is fantastic. So I'm going to read it, but you're going to be able to read it as well on the screen until I can get this into a little bit more of a technically savvy model. And I want you to read this text. This comes from the Talmud, from Ketubot. And it says, our rabbis taught, how does one dance before the bride? Beit Shammai says, the bride as she is. And Beit Hillel says, beautiful and gracious bride. So the rabbis have this teaching that says, once upon a time, they were trying to figure out how do they approach a bride at the moment of her wedding. And this is so appropriate because while we're discussing this idea, it's so sad and it really is touching my heart and my soul that so many brides and grooms are having to postpone and suspend their joyous moments because of the current crisis. So this is an imagination of how we're going to dance before the bride. So one school says, as she is. That means if maybe she's not the most physically attractive bride, perhaps maybe she has some hair that's thinning out, or a wart that's growing on her chin, or there's some kind of like misshapen eyebrow that has persisted since she was a child. Beit Shammai says it doesn't matter what she looks like. You dance with her as she looks. And the school of Hillel has something incredibly radical to say, which says, beautiful and graceful bride. It's to say that no matter what the bride looks like, no matter what the circumstances as they are appear to you, whether they're physical or they're mental or emotional, our responsibility when we gather together and rejoice in a wedding with a bride is we say that the bride is beautiful and gracious. She is, without a doubt, the most beautiful being that is in our midst, and we are so privileged to be in her presence. So now they continue the teaching. Hold on to that, and we're going to get to why this is a big text to begin with. So Beit Shammai says to Beit Hillel, well, if she was lame or blind, does one say of her beautiful and graceful bride? And I had implied that in my explanation before. Whereas the Torah said, keep thee far from a false matter. In other words, the Torah teaches us we shouldn't lie. So then Hillel says back to Beit Shammai, according to your words, if one has made a bad purchase in the market, should one praise it in his eyes or depreciate it? Surely one should praise it in his eyes. Therefore, the sages said, always should the disposition of man be pleasant with people. Okay, so you got a chance to look at the text. Beit Hillel says, whenever you see a bride, you should say of her that she is the most beautiful and gracious and precious being that is in the room and is in the gathering of this community. And in celebration, she is the most treasured person, the most honored dignitary. She's like a queen. And Beit Shammai says, the reality is, whatever the bride looks like is how we should treat her. The question that I have for us is, how do you decide the way that you should react? What goes in your mind when you're trying to come up with the decision? Do you well up with inside of you a tremendous amount of compassion, something that suspends your impulse and your judgment so that you can transcend what might be your first impression to get to a deeper truth? Or is it something so certain for you and so important to you that you must speak the truth? And in speaking the truth, not only are you being authentic to yourself, but you're also being authentic to the person that is in presence. The truth is that both of them are right. Both of them have their moments. What I think Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai are arguing against is what happens in a moment in which we're suspending all of our preconceptions. We're trying to lift ourselves out of the regularity in which we encounter the world. And a wedding is one of those moments in which we're supposed to put aside everything that we feel and think about the world. And we're supposed to enter into this place when a wedding represents the world as it ought to be. It is, as we say in the seventh blessing of the Sheva Brachot, of the seven blessings that are recited under the chuppah, we make real that which is ideal. When we say that the hills of Judah are going to rejoice, what we're telling ourselves and what we're celebrating in that moment is that this union is a promise of a world that is better than today. That their union, the world that they create with themselves and for their family and the community that they're going to inhabit, is something that is more rich, it's more enlightened, it's more compassionate and more loving than it would have been before without their union. That is the question that is presented in this text. And it's a question that I ask us to begin thinking about when we're talking about this whole idea of Mussar. Because Mussar as a concept is not necessarily about a perfect way of behavior. The reality is that in Mussar, there is a big concept, one of the fundamental concepts, that every human being is endowed with two impulses, the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara. And you would think that our goal in life is to diminish, eradicate, even eliminate, if it's possible, the Yetzer Hara, and only live in the Yetzer HaTov. To eliminate any evil, judgmental, negative thought that exists in our lives, and then only think positively and only treat everybody with the absolute positive way that we can treat people. And that's the world as it ought to be. And while that's true, that's not the reality. The reality is we have these impulses and they're constantly in tension with each other. We're constantly in conflict with our impulses, our Yetzer HaTov and our Yetzer Hara. This is where Mussar begins. Mussar begins by recognizing that there is a decision to be made, a choice of whether you're going to act in the next moment based on what is called your Yetzer Hara, your evil inclination or your evil impulse, or your Yetzer HaTov, your good impulse, your good inclination, the quality of being and building and becoming. And that choice is very vital to how we are going to live meaningful lives. Mussar is the practice. It's the understanding that we are in conflict with these two competing ideas all the time. It's what being human is all about. But how we make those choices, whether it's a choice of what you do in a joyful moment like a wedding, or you make the choice of how you're going to talk to your kid. For those of you that have children in the homes, because we're all being sequestered and they're doing something that, boy, just crawls right under your skin. And right when you think your impulse is to just scream and yell and put them into timeout, which, wait a minute, there's nowhere for them to go because you're all in this small space together, you may think of a way to act differently. That's what Mussar is all about. So tonight, for the remaining moments that we have about 45 minutes, and we're going to finish our learning together at about 8 o'clock. And we're going to meet again on Thursday evening at the same time. And I hope that not only will you enjoy this class and continue to learn, but you will also take a moment, like this video, and share it with your friends. And so that when your friends see that there's another class being taught, we would just love to spread the word of Torah out in the world. A last comment with my PSA, and then we'll back to the text. We're so concerned about the spread of this virus. The greatest response that we can have is to spread the world with our Torah. It's to spread our world with kindness and learning and wisdom and goodness. We need to practice that. And thank you for being a part of this learning session to have that experience. So take a moment. I'm going to try this again. I apologize if this is not the most ideal, and I appreciate your accommodation of the text as we figure out how to do this better next time. So take a look at this text, okay? This is from Rabbi Ira Stone. Rabbi Ira Stone is my teacher. He is a great leader in the contemporary Mussar world. He has a class that he teaches Mussar to rabbis, and I was privileged to be a student of his a few years ago, and I know that they continue to teach. And if you're interested in learning more about Rabbi Ira Stone and the Center for Contemporary Mussar, you will go ahead and look that up online and learn on classes with him as well. This comes from his book, A Responsible Life. I believe that this comes from the Responsible Life. It's an introduction to what Mussar and the Midot, these qualities that we're going to talk about. A Midah tonight that we're studying is Seder, order. And the Midot, and there are enumerated many in different contexts. So sometimes they're set up as 13, sometimes they're set up as 18, sometimes they're a list of 72. There's many, many qualities that we can learn from and become masters of. So look at what he writes. Understood this way, the Midot serve as an instruments by which the finite and the infinite intersect. So just to pause on that and to reflect on that idea. Midah, a quality, a character trait, is an instrument. It's a tool. It's a way of behaving that helps us intersect the finite, the temporal, the present, the being in this world now, and the infinite, the ideal, the possible, the becoming, the better elements of ourselves. Through the Midot, human beings transcend their tragic enchantment to this world, transforming it into another world, a world characterized by the possibility of future different from the present. More importantly, acceptance of this responsibility veritably defines the task of commandment. In other words, what he's saying is that Midot are the transcendent instruments which enable us to see a different future than we may have first perceived in the moment. I want to say something about that because that's our reality right now. We are trying to understand how we are going to craft this future. The challenge that we have is that there are restrictions and limitations that are changing and transforming our social behavior by the minute. But all the while we are kind of wringing our hands and being uncomfortable with all of this change and trying to figure out where we fit into it, there is something we can do. And learning how to be masters of what we can do is exactly what we need in times like this. So when we're going to talk about creating order in our lives, that idea is not only something about how to understand and to make the most of the finite, the temporal, the present, and the now, but when we do this effectively, it will become the transcendent connection to what our best selves and what the world at its best can be. And we need so much of that. We need to remind ourselves of that and practice that. And that's why we're going to continue learning in this way. So let's see what else he says. He also says, hence the Midot constitute what the tradition understands was communicated between God and Israel at Sinai. In other words, the Midot form the content of the formal structure we call Torah. The text of the Torah and the specific historically conditioned laws contained therein are the responses of a culture that has encountered the obligation to transform the world from the present to the future by way of bearing the burden of others. They are often called in the tradition garments. It is the process of developing one's midot described below that allows for the garment of Torah to clothe the soul duly prepared. Like all garments, they serve to protect the wearer. So the achievement of sufficient midah proficiency to allow oneself to be clothed with Torah then allows Torah in turn to protect and sustain the achievement of midot. What I think the rabbi is teaching us here is that this concept that we call Torah, which is more than just the pages in the book that we read on the Sabbath or throughout the week, more than the words themselves, which describe our behavior, which tell our history, which give us a sense of our story and our identity. The Torah is, for us, a garment. It's something that we wrap ourselves in. And when we fulfill our responsibility called midot, commandments, mitzvot. When we behave the way the Torah is instructing us to behave, the garment simultaneously protects us, and we are a protector for it. That is a concept that continues to flow throughout tradition, and it's something that gives us another reason why we are studying the tradition in this way, with these particular focuses on quality. So let's go to one quality that we're going to talk about tonight. And I hope you guys are still having fun and doing well, and just send me a little thumbs up if you're with me, and give me a little smiley faces, because that was fun and nice. So here we go. This is the quality called Seder, order. And this comes from a book called the Cheshbon HaNefesh, which is an 18th century work, and it's by a man named Menachem Mendel of Levin of Satanov, and it's a compilation of these virtues and qualities. Shall we continue to study Mussar deeply? There are many different scholars throughout the years that we will refer to. One of them is many years ago, Bachya ibn Pekuda. He wrote a book called Chovot HaLevavot, and it was not using the words midot, but he called them virtues and values. And then there was the great teacher, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the Ramchal, and he wrote a book called The Path of the Just, or Mesilat Yesharim. We'll be referring to that often through our midot study and our Mussar study. And as well, we have this Menachem Mendel of Satanov, and there are other great teachers like Israel Salanter and our great teachers of modernity like Ira Stone and Alan Marinus, who have made this their scholarly focus. So here's what order says. Take a look. Okay? Whoop. Seder, order. All your actions and possessions should be orderly, each and every one in a set place and at a set time. Let your thoughts always be free to deal with that which lies ahead of you. Okay? All your actions, I'll repeat it, all your actions and possessions should be orderly. Each and every one is in a set place and at a set time. Let your thoughts always be free to deal with that which lies ahead of you. When my family and I sat down Sunday evening, and we talked about the new reality that was going to change our lifestyle, and we laughed because we have a very busy family. And for those who don't know, I have 2 teenagers and an 11-year-old. And my wife works full-time as a congregational rabbi in Woodland Hills, and I have a full-time position as a congregational rabbi in Encino. And we have a very busy life, and especially at this age, we are not always at home. So we are now adjusting to the reality that we are spending more time in this home, which we've called our home for 12 years, than we've ever been in our lives. And when we sat down with our kids, we sort of like took in that reality. When we sat down with our kids, we came up with a plan. We said, we're going to make charts, and every single day, there are things that we need to do. So first, we have to be more respectful of our space than we have before. So we have to make sure that the glasses get put in the sink, the blankets get folded up from the couch, that if there's loose papers that the kids are using from classes, that they can't just decide to make the house their whole classroom, that everybody is going to have to do their part to make this space livable. And then we took, so that was kind of fun. And I would say we're fairly neat, but that was like a new reality for us. And it was a new expectation for us, because I think we're casual and we sort of let our lives kind of be flexible, especially after busy work lives and busy school lives. We want to come to this place that we called home, and we want to just relax. We don't want to have to worry about all this order that happens. Now in our lives, we have to be incredibly orderly, because the place in which we have had designed previously as a place to relax and to let go and to let loose is now become a place that requires a significant amount of order. And then the second thing that we did is we created a chart, and we made sure in our family that we were doing 3 things: mind, body, spirit, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And each and every day we had to make sure that we did something physical. We weren't just going to sit in front of our computer screens when we weren't in class or we weren't teaching or we weren't conferring with our colleagues. What we were doing was something physical. Exercise, walking the dog. Boy, thank God the rain is over because we walked that dog more than he's also been walked in a really long time. And then mentally. So it wasn't just enough to like be sitting in classes, but we needed to make sure that we were doing something that nourished our minds. Reading a book. Maybe like talking with a friend about something online that we were learning new. And then the third part, the sort of like emotional and spiritual and emotive part of our lives, what we were going to do was make sure that either we just checked in and took care of our hearts, which we do around the dinner table, but also we reached out to the people that we care about the most. So all of us are making phone calls or sending messages to the people that we haven't actually spoken to in quite a long time because our lives are busy. And we just called to check in on them. And it's been incredibly rewarding as a spiritual discipline as much as an emotional one. Order, going back to the Mussar Midah, order is letting your life be orderly so that when everything has a place and a set time, it is prepared. It is ready, because when life happens, you have to be ready for the next decision that is in front of you. And this makes the most fundamental proposition of what midot are all about. The first thing that we ought to do is get our house in order. Sometimes it's physically, but it's also a mental and an emotional and an intellectual order that takes place. And once you have, to the best of your ability, a sense of order, then you can make the best possible decision that lies in front of you. How many times, and you know this, how many times are you feeling a sense of panic, feeling a sense of anxiety, feeling a little overwhelmed sense of stress, and a decision comes across and you feel like by impulse you're going to make the best possible choice? Sometimes it's true. Life has to be in that kind of place, and that you have to make a choice in the moment. How much better it is if your life is in order and you are prepared so that when those decisions happen, and you might be caught off guard, or you might be a little anxious about what decision is lying in front of you, your sense of order is going to be so critical to making the best possible choice that you can. So just a little bit further, if you look, it says right here, okay, Seder, this is horrible and I hate this and I'm going to make this good for us. There we go. Seder is a quality of both time and space. Working on this midah allows us to arrange our actions and our things in an orderly manner. Orderliness creates a feeling of confidence and control by knowing that our belongings and our obligations are arranged. Orderliness allows us to respond in a timely manner to events by finding items exactly where they need to be and exactly do not have to constantly manage our possessions and events. It frees us up to deal with things that arrive unexpectedly, especially if we do not have to constantly manage our possessions and events. And finally, it gives us the opportunity to be available to the others in our life. So I want to jump actually in the learning, if you have the text, and I want to go to a place that is actually really important in this Mussar process. So I want you to think about what was just shared, everything that's been just shared, and now we're going to turn it back on you a little bit. Okay? And what I want you to do is we're going to go through a little bit of a meditative process. This is not meditation. This is actually just quieting the mind and focusing on the ideas. Eventually, we could add in levels of meditation. It's very important to be able to do that as well, but that is not our subject for tonight. But I want you to begin thinking about, when does orderliness or being put together create a feeling of confidence for you? When does it allow you to respond in a timely manner And timely doesn't mean immediate. It means knowing exactly the right time to make the right response. Sometimes that timeliness may be after quite some time that someone else's disorder or chaos has to run its course before you can respond with a sense of order and a sense of calmness and a sense of confidence. And I want you to think about what it means when you are ordered, how you are available to others. I suppose that the converse is true on all of those. And I hope that you're thinking about that as well, right? What happens when your disorderliness has shattered your confidence? And what happens when your disorderliness does not permit you to be present in the lives of others in the way that your best self would want to be? So I want you to participate now with me in a little bit of a meditation. This is an important part of what the Mussar practice is all about. So wherever you are, and I wish I could see you, I want you to sit up straight if you're sitting in a chair. If you're sitting in a couch and you're kind of leaning back and relaxing, I want you to sit up straight. Try to get your feet on the ground. Don't cross your legs. If you can, put your hands on your knees, on your thighs. Just rest them comfortably. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, you can do that. And I want you to begin taking a few slow, deep breaths. So the best way to breathe deeply is to breathe in through the nose and then out through the mouth. And if you can breathe diaphragmatically, which means breathing with your stomach and not your lungs, that's even better. If you're accustomed to this kind of breathing, it is an excellent way to practice slowing down your mind and entering into a place when you can be the most considerate and also the most emotive about this feeling of creating order. So close your eyes if you're comfortable. Take a deep breath in. Exhale. Try again. Take a deep breath in and exhale. And if you're closing your eyes, I want you to focus on your breath. I want you to feel the action of breathing. Deep breath in and exhale. Feel your breathing as a connection to those close to you. Now we're in a virtual space, but we're all listening and participating in this together. So breathe in deeply and exhale deeply. Just be conscious of the fact that there are other people and other beings, whether they're in your home, whether they're online virtually, or as you breathe in deeply, just feel the presence of neighbors in their homes. Feel the presence of those who are caring for the ill in our community, those in hospitals, those in assisted living and nursing care facilities, those in places where healing is necessary. And as you feel their presence, breathe in deeply. Feel the presence of our leaders having to make very, very difficult decisions to protect the safety and well-being of all of us. And as you breathe in deeply, expand to our brothers and sisters all across the globe, in countries that are just filled with suffering, and countries that are reacting and responding to this crisis just like we are. And add in your expansion of connection, hopes and prayers that healing and strength is present and available for those who need. And as you continue to breathe deeply, I want you to bring the focus back to yourself. But I don't want you to be in your body. I want you to try and see yourself at a distance. I want you to see you looking at yourself as though you're in a dream and you're watching your life kind of unroll before you like a grand Academy Award-winning movie. And as you begin to approach yourself from this vantage point, I want you to visualize one of those situations, maybe with someone for whom today you weren't able to make time. And that might be as simple as hearing a child who asked for some simple help that you knew the child could get on her or his own, but you didn't have time to respond. You just cut it short. Or what about other people on the phone, because maybe you were having a conference and trying to figure out what to do next? And maybe because other people were talking and you felt so compelled and you wanted to answer, you wanted to respond, that you cut somebody off. Or maybe it was somebody that was out there, a stranger, and you were so concerned about your own safety and your own well-being that even with just a little bit of time, you could have made the space, not only the physical space, but also the sort of emotional space to see them, to see their humanity, to recognize them. And as you're thinking about this, I want you to ask the question, how did my inability to plan my time separate me from another? Or say it differently, how did my lack of order, my disorder about my life, separate me from another? And while you're asking and thinking about that and looking at yourself and wondering about that moment, you ask yourself this question: how well did you set your priorities in order? Maybe everything was in order and this was just the limit. Or maybe you hadn't ordered much of anything, and this was a moment in which you could have used a little bit more structure, a little bit more organization, a little more order to help you respond in your best ability. So now, if you can remember that encounter with another person, try to see that person from a distance and ask yourself this question: how did the confusion or the disorder that was in my life affect him or her? Did I cause that person harm by my disorder? A deeper question: what was I afraid of? Were you afraid of anything that moment you had to react from your impulse because you couldn't be, you felt you couldn't be for the other person? Take a deep breath. And now ask yourself this last question: how could I be more orderly so that I can be of loving to support to him or her or to that situation? How can I become a more orderly person so that I can present my best self with confidence, with readiness, with a sense of love for the other person that's in my midst? Take a deep breath, one more big deep breath, and begin to slowly bring yourself back to the present. So we have a chat column, and if anybody would like to just share their experience, that would be fantastic. So go ahead and type it if you feel comfortable. I don't know if everybody gets to see everybody else, but we're now a big group of friends. We just went on a wild meditation together. We're all kind of on the same page and trying to make sense of our world, try to bring some order into a little bit of this chaos that we're experiencing. So if anybody wants to share what they were thinking about, or maybe responding to that last question and saying, how could you be more loving and supportive through your orderliness? Perhaps the next time that an encounter similar to that reveals itself to you. And if you're writing, and while you're doing that, what I'd like you to do is go back. If you have the text, you're going to go back to the second page. If you notice, I went to the third page. And now I want to show you, this is from Alan Marinus, who isn't a rabbi. He's just a really caring, thoughtful human being. And he wrote this book called Everyday Holiness. And this was his response about orderliness. Okay? If you are not careful about the cleanliness of your house, you are also likely to be lax about the purity of your spirit. So I kind of chuckle about that, as I hope you are too, because living in clean houses is kind of really important. And I don't know if you saw it, but I love the maid that told the people that she was going to come and work in the house, the housekeeper, that she was going to be working from home today because of the coronavirus. And I just think that's kind of our reality about how things are going to get clean. But as much as you think about the cleanliness of your house physically, it's clearly meant to be a deeper kind of cleanliness. And the house that we're talking about is your spirit. So if the cleanliness of your spirit is something that you need to work on, it's probably really good to make sure, first and foremost, that the cleanliness of your stuff is in order. That's what this work is about. This work is about how can you put your life in the best order possible so that when it comes time to be clean in your spirit and to share the love and the support that you know you want to share with other people, you can do it from the best place. Not the place of anxiety, not the place of chaos, not the place of concern, even though those are really good places sometimes, but from the place in which your values and your best self is present in the next decision you have to make. That's the work that we have. So I don't see any comments. Don't be shy. I'd love to hear any comments of anybody who's reacted to that. But I want to think about this last part. This is, again, from Rabbi Ira Stone. Okay? So this is the Midah of Seder. So I'm going to take a look at the page. There we go. You guys are such good people. And boy, am I going to learn how to do this right next time. The Midah of Seder. Talk about order, right? This is just in case you thought that the rabbi was the only person who got his order together. Let's just show you how I am trying to share text with you right now. And I hope you're having a good sense of humor about it as I am. The Midah of Seder is foundational to all other midot, because without order, we do not have the ability to develop the tools essential to the Mussar practice. We might all agree that order is necessary, but what is the right order? In creating orderliness, we could choose to focus on spatial order, that is aligning objects, or temporal order, time between events. But the real order we are concerned with here is priority order. What is most important is based on what has the most impact on the others in your life. Let me pause right there, because what I think has been shared is so essential. Being orderly is not just about having clean drawers. And if you're stuck at home and there's one of those drawers that you put all your stuff in, now might be a good time to check it out and see if there's some stuff that you can get rid of. But that's not the kind of orderliness that we're talking about. And it's also not the orderliness that is worried about time. And that's actually kind of vital in our moment, because we don't know when this safer at home behavior is going to be lifted. We don't know when our schools are going to resume. We don't know when our congregations are going to be able to gather once again and to worship together in person. So it's not only about an orderliness that is temporal. That's important. Space and time are important. But the kind of order that the rabbi has been teaching us, the one that I want us to begin thinking about, is about priority order. How do you make the decisions that are so necessary so that for the next moment, the next decision that you make, you're making it from your best possible place? I had a conversation with a doctor friend today. Very, very difficult decision making that doctors have to do when resources become limited. How do you make priority when you cannot give everybody everything in the exact moment that they need it? That kind of priority ordering is something that requires a mastery of the spirit. That's something that takes soul work. There's no book that you can open up with a set of priorities that's going to tell you how to react in situations. Look at the moment that we're in. This is one that we call unprecedented. Certainly it is for my lifetime. And for those that have lived many years, there's nothing quite like this. There's no guidebook for life in a moment like this. But what there is a guidebook for is creating priority. And just like that first text that we learned from the Talmud about whether Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, how they treat the bride in that moment, the order of priority is it's not about being truthful, even though that is an important value. But it's about trying to organize your truth so that you can present the best possible truth that is available in that moment. That's exactly the kind of order that we're talking about here. That kind of work takes study. That kind of work takes an opportunity to expose each other to that, test it, recognize that we're not going to be perfect all the time in making those kinds of decisions. Trying to grapple with the question of what priorities we have to set and how we set them and when we set them. That kind of work is what I think we ought to spend the balance of our time with. That's just for order. Let's wait until we get to some of the other midot. Let's finish up with the rabbi's thought, and then we'll have a concluding thought from here. So, what is most important is based on what has the most impact on others in our life. To really express true priority, our neighbor, our decisions and actions should be ordered on the basis of the divine will to love our neighbor as ourselves. The first and foremost quality of order is to love the other as ourselves. The word Seder occurs only once in the Torah, and there it appears in a negative plural when Jobe alludes to death as the land of utter darkness, like the deepest darkness and the deepest shadow and disorder, where even the light is like darkness. Disorder, chaos, is the equivalent of death. When we are disorganized, we are not available to the other. In this state, we are ego-driven. When we are disordered, our self is not capable of bonding with another to form our soul. I love this idea. First, that the Torah doesn't really talk about order except in the book of Job. It's actually the Bible, in the book of Job, and he talks about disorder. So he can identify what doesn't work. This work is about how to identify what works and to practice it. And I think that this has a wonderful introduction of what kind of order that we need. And I present this with a wonderful vision of the next couple weeks. One that is inspiring. It's a little disorienting about how it's going to work, but it's inspiring because this is our great holiday. And when it comes, it asks us to have a Seder, an order. And I'm talking about Passover, Pesach. The Pesach Seder, something that was created by the rabbis thousands of years ago, was designed not only to be an educational moment, not only to be a time in which we gathered family and friends together to celebrate and rejoice in life, but it's also a moment in which we can renew this priority of order in our lives. And if you think about the story and just think about it, what happens is there's plagues that come upon Egypt with a very particular order. a very particular Seder of the way that God is manifest in response to Pharaoh and the Egyptians, and the way that God reveals God's self to Moshe, to Moses, and to the Israelite people, and brings them under the wings of divine presence, not only to freedom, but to Mount Sinai, where they'll receive the words of Torah, the words of order, the words of guidance. That story that we tell is it's just like having order, is the most fundamental story that we have as a Jewish people to define ourselves and our identity. Our story isn't just merely a story of oppression and redemption. Our story is about making order out of chaos and knowing that we've been living in a place of chaos in our lives. The Seder is an opportunity to reclaim order. And the order that we reclaim is one that has been given to us with love, one that has been given to us with purpose, one that has been treasured and protected throughout the millennia. And it is our ongoing responsibility to study, learn from that order, and practice that order out in the world beyond. This is the concluding thought. As the holiday of Passover begins, there are many, many qualities that we're going to have to rely upon in ways that we haven't really thought about before. There's things that we have to really practice, like patience, like equanimity, like cleanliness, like trust, like speaking truth, like being faithful. These qualities are the things that we have the gift in these coming weeks to prepare for. And these qualities and these virtues are the ones that our Mussar tradition enables us. It compels us to study not only for a holiday, but each and every day in our lives. There's lots more that we can add to this learning. Tonight, what I hope you've received from the learning is not only a little bit of text, not only a little bit about what it means to make the best possible decision that's in front of you, not only an opportunity to reflect upon it yourself and how this applies to your life, but also, and finally, to see how this behavior and this quality enables us to put out into the world the very best of who we are as individuals, the very best of who we are as communities, the very best of what we need to spread in a world in which there is so much potential illness and suffering that needs our response with love, with compassion, with dignity, with Torah learning, and with order. Thanks so much for learning with me tonight. I hope you'll tune in next Thursday night at 7 p.m. when we'll study the next quality, which I think is also apropos, separation. Pre-shoot, it's called in Mussar literature and in Hebrew, and we'll understand what separation is all about and how that's an important and vital step that we need on this journey towards freedom. So I wish everyone a really great week. I hope that you continue to tune in to all of the great things that are happening at Valley Beth Shalom, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.